Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Many listeners of this podcast probably already know a lot about the wine and alcohol industries. What you probably don't know is that there's a new type of wine that has been developed in the last 3 to 5 years. This new type of wine is known as natural wine. And our guest today, Todd White, is going to teach you the difference between natural wines and commercial wines. Todd is also going to tell you why drinking more can actually boost your performance and how he took his business from $37,000 in revenue in 2015 to over $25 million in 2017. So if you want to learn how to grow your business exponentially in a short amount of time, or have an interest in learning how drinking more wine will boost your performance as a business executive, then stay tuned. Todd is going to give you the tips, tricks, and tools on all of that and much more.
Todd, thank you very much for joining us today. I am looking forward to this. I almost feel bad that I don't have a glass of wine sitting next to me for this whole interview. But I'm
Thor, yeah.
You're going to tell me why I don't want the brand that I'm currently drinking. So I'm interested to dive right into this thing.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to sharing with your audience a lot of fun facts about wine and also how we built this incredibly fast-growing business.
That's terrific. I got to tell you how this all started. I was prospecting at a local wine establishment. I was sitting there having a glass of wine, and I was talking to the bartender. I said, it's really interesting. All of the spirits anyway, we're starting to see these brands emerge that are quote unquote diet brands, right? Skinny Girl, vodka, and I think tequila as well. And I said, why don't they have like a diet wine? So, of course, 3 or 4 glasses into this bottle of wine, we've come up with a whole business plan. It's like, I know we're going to dominate the diet wine industry. Wonder if it even exists. So, of course, I go and Google it, and there you are. So I'm like, there he is. I've got to have this guy on the show, and I've got to find out what's going on. And it was interesting because I'll take that one step further is I saw a lot of references to our friend Mark Sisson, and he was on the show a couple months ago. I said, if Mark loves this guy, I'm going to love this guy. So what are we doing wrong, and what should we be drinking, and what's the differences between the wines that you have and what's on the general market?
All right, well, let's break this down. Here's what's happening in the wine business is exactly the same thing that has happened in our food supply. So there's been massive corporate consolidation. That's the first problem. And so we're going to talk about today 2 types of wines. The type of wine I sell and drink, which is called natural wine. That's a very specific farming and winemaking protocol, which we'll talk about and I'll explain to you. And then there's commercial wines, which are everything else. Now, there's a couple of 100,000 winemakers in the world. There are less than 500 who make natural wines, and most of them are located in Europe. And we're the largest buyer and seller of natural wines in the world. So it's not specifically, we'll talk about why it's a diet-friendly wine, but we're not really in the diet wine business. We're in the business of selling a whole, healthy, pure, organic, natural product. That's not what commercial wines are, and I'll explain the differences to you. But to start with what's happening in the supply chain, which is this massive corporate consolidation. Same thing that's happening in our food supply, right? You've got 6 players selling us most of our food. Right? In the wine business, it's even more complicated and confusing for 2 reasons. First of all, wine companies hide behind thousands of brands and labels, right? The top 3 wine companies in the United States make 52% of all the wine sold in the United States. The top 3. Now, you don't know that. Wow. Because they're hiding behind thousands of brands and labels. These are multi-billion-dollar conglomerates making factory wine. 70% of all the wine in the United States manufactured in the United States, and I use the word manufactured because they're made in huge factories. 70% of the wine made in the United States is made by the top 30 companies, right? So we're talking about massive corporate consolidation is really when we talk about commercial wines and what's wrong with them, it's going to all come back to the same issue that plagues our food supply. It's called greed and money, right? The other problem that's very confusing about wines that you don't have with food products is that wine is the only major food group without a contents label on it. Now, this is very, very important. And there's a reason why there's not a contents label on wine. The reason is the wine spends millions of dollars in lobby money to keep contents labeling off of wine. And why they don't want a contents label on it is because they don't want you to know what's really in it. Because commercial wines, the FDA, there are 76 approved additives by the FDA for the use in winemaking. And some of them are pretty nasty, poisonous chemicals, right? And so here's the problem. You can't make wine in very large quantities without the use of these chemicals and additives. So this is just the very beginning. So we talk about massive corporate consolidation, industrial farming practices, industrial winemaking manufacturing, right? That's what's happening with the wines that you're buying at your grocery store or even in your local wine retail shop, unless they're natural wines. What makes a wine natural? It is farmed without the use of any synthetic fertilizers. In our case, it's farmed without the use of irrigation, and that's very important. As you know, the name of our company is Dry Farm Wines. Yeah. So all of our wines have a very specific wine growing and wine making protocol. So on the growing side, all chemical free, no synthetic fertilizers, no additions to nature at all, including no addition of water, right? And so we see irrigation, and there's a very fundamental reason why irrigation is bad for grape farming. In Europe, in most of Europe, it's illegal. It is a crime to irrigate a grapevine in almost all of Europe. And the reason being that they have these very specific appellation laws. These are crimes. The reason they have these very specific laws is because Europeans who've been growing and making wine for more than 3,000 years know what we know. When you irrigate a grapevine, you fundamentally change the way that vine relates to the earth, relates to its neighbors, the physiology of the ripening of the fruit. And this is make total common sense to your listeners and to you. When you inject water into a berry, it dilutes the character and flavor of the juice, right? Now, what it does do, what irrigation does do, and more than 99% of U.S. vineyards are irrigated. And the reason they're irrigated is because the fruit weighs more when it's filled with water.
Makes sense.
Right? And fruit is sold by the ton, my friend. This is about money, right? This is not about making better or healthier wine. So just common sense, the root ball of an irrigated grapevine is about 3 or 4 feet deep and in diameter because it gets all of its water and all of its nutrient from a little drip hose just above the trunk. Right? So the roots don't spread out. They're not searching. They're not competing with their neighbors, as an example. Right? So in an unirrigated grapevine, at a mature grapevine will have roots that can span 50 feet deep because the vine is struggling in search for water and nutrient. It's also struggling against its neighbor. And that fight, that struggle that the vine goes through creates a much denser quality of fruit, a much deeper character of fruit, right? And we know that resistance builds power. Right. We know that resistance creates substance. Same way in business, same way in your life, same way in weightlifting, right? When nature's no different, right? So that resistance creates a better quality fruit. And here's the thing. When you make wine, a natural wine, a real wine, an honest wine, the quality of the grape juice, the quality of the fruit will determine more than 90% of the outcome of the wine, right? So the beginning juice product really determines what you end up with in terms of quality. So having that high quality character of fruit, and that's the reason natural farming without the use of chemicals, and by encouraging biodiversity. So, we about 100 or so years ago, we went from poly farming to mono farming practices, right? And the use of chemicals, where natural farmers are concerned about living soils and biodiversity on the farm, having animals and orchards and bees and flowers and and farm animals. So it's a whole biosphere of farming. It's a lifestyle. These farmers are like hippie activists, right? I mean, most of these farmers, because they're from Europe, we don't sell any domestic wines. There's no wines made in the United States that meet our criteria.
Got it.
Right? And most of these are multi-generational landowners these farms have been in their families for, 100 or 200 years, right? And so another interesting thing about natural wines is that natural wines are also made from indigenous grapes that are indigenous to the region where they're grown, right? And in most of Europe, again, for most of Europe, not all, but most of Europe, you can only grow specific grape varietals in specific regions.
Yeah, they take their winemaking pretty seriously.
In the United States, I live in Napa Valley. You can grow any grape you want anywhere you want. Yeah, it's an obsession, right? And so we sell this product that is really an art. It's an obsession of the earth and of how the vine relates to nature.
Todd, let me ask you this. At the end of the day, when I'm working with my clients, it's all about peak performance. And it would be unrealistic for me to say to my clients, look, you're a CEO. I don't want you drinking any wine. I don't want you drinking any alcohol. It's just not going to help you in your business and in your life. What differences do these wine make to the peak performer that has to get up the next day and be at their best? What are the physical changes or non-changes in the body that happen between your domestic wine and the wines that you're selling?
So our friend Marson will tell you the same thing I will tell you, and there are more than 100 health leaders that endorse our wines. Everybody from Dr. David Perlmutter, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dave Asprey at Bulletproof Executive. The list is super, super long. And the reason they endorse this, and including Joe Polish at the Genius Network, including Peter Diamandis at A360, these are performance conferences. They're not health conferences.
Right. So
most of our audience has both an interest in health and performance. These wines are hangover free. Let me repeat that, hangover free. I drink 1 to 2 bottles every night. Now here's what's giving you a hangover. Here's what's affecting your performance in the morning from drinking wine or drinking any alcohol. So number one, it's too much alcohol, right? Which is the reason, as a health leader, we do not recommend that people drink spirits because they're simply too high in alcohol, even if you're drinking. So in the Paleo and the keto movement and the performance movement, even with Bulletproof Executive, there's an emphasis on drinking tequila or clean spirits, if you will. I don't drink spirits. I don't recommend other people drink them for this reason. They're simply too high in alcohol. At Dry Farm Wines, not only are our wines naturally made and completely pure, but in addition, we don't sell any wine that's over 12.5% alcohol. And most of the wines I drink are 11 to 11.5%. Commercial wines begin around 14 or 14.5% and go up to 17%. That difference in alcohol is monumental in the way you feel the next morning. Most people don't have a glass of wine. They have several glasses of wine. This is the same thing with the spirits. Most people don't have a drink. They have several drinks, particularly people who drink on a regular basis, which is our customers. Our customers want a healthier, performance-driven way to enjoy a fine wine product. So we only sell low alcohol wines. Now, not all natural wines are low alcohol. It's just that we have an alcohol cap because there are two things that are really driving, three things that are in wine, three things that are driving the result of how you feel. One is alcohol. So drinking lower alcohol matters. Number two, they're sugar-free. So all of our wines are lab tested independently by us using a certified third-party enologist who does independent lab testing on every single wine we sell. We will not accept a wine into our portfolio until it has passed our lab test. And of the wines that we taste and like and send to lab, about 40% of them fail at the lab, right? So we've taken a quantified approach to not only the aesthetic and beauty and elegance of taste, but we've also taken it to a science. This is the reason our business has grown 400x in revenue in the last 3 years, right?
Are you telling me that does the sugar content come out from the grape during the fermenting process? Where's the sugar removed from a grape? Because we got fructose.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. This is actually the most common question that we get is how are your wines sugar-free? Isn't there sugar in grapes? Yeah, it's a very common question. In fact, the most common question. So let's talk a moment about how wine's made. How wine is made is the grapes are harvested. The grape juice is pressed from the fruit. That is free-run juice. Free-run juice from a red grape and free-run juice from a white grape are both clear. Okay? How red wine gets its color is that the skins are put back in the tank with the free-run juice, and that's how red wine becomes red. It gets its color from the skin, not the juice. All right? That's just a fundamental fun fact to know about how red and white wines are made. Now, the wine is then inoculated with yeast. The yeast eats the sugar in the juice. The byproduct of the yeast eating the sugar is carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol, right? If the yeast, this is a very important point. There are two important points about yeast. I'm going to cover the first, I'm going to cover one here. If the yeast is allowed to eat all of the sugar, what's known as a full fermentation, the yeast will die and the wine is sugar-free. But here's what's happening in commercial wines. Commercial wine, the winemaker is using sulfur dioxide to kill the yeast prior to it completing fermentation, leaving what's known as residual sugar behind in the wine. Now, the reason they do that is because sugar adds mouthfeel. Sugar adds a little body to the wine. Americans love sugar. It's a global problem. As humans, we are addicted to the toxin of sugar. I'm sugar-free. I'm actually on a ketogenic diet and have been for 4 years. We're super biohackers. We can talk about some of our daily practices: cold thermogenesis, ketogenic diet, high-intensity training. So we're sugar-free. That's kind of part of the story about how I got in this business, was creating a healthier way to drink. So sugar and alcohol, nastying over. Here's how I'll demonstrate that to you. You've probably had a margarita or two, right?
Sure.
Okay. If you have a shot of tequila or tequila with, let's just call it sparkling water and some lime, how you feel is very different from having a shot of tequila versus drinking a margarita, right? The sugar and alcohol together are a nasty combination. Right. And then finally, the third item that we just don't know much about because there's no real study on it, are the use of genetically modified commercial yeast. And I'll talk about that in a moment. I said I had 2 points on yeast. And then second of all, these additives that are going into commercial wine products, we just don't know what effect. Here's what I can tell you. When you drink our wine, as Mark Sisson and over 100 other health leaders have done, when you drink our wine, thousands and thousands of people do every day, when you drink our wine, there'll be both a noticeable difference in how you feel. The quality of your buzz is cleaner and lighter, is more cognitively connected. And cognitive connection is a really important thing. When we're celebrating with alcohol, we want to stay cognitively connected. And so the second thing is you just don't have any negative remnants the next morning. I get up hangover free, as do our customers, every single morning. And as I said, I drink 1 to 2 bottles every night. right? And as does everybody I work with, and thousands of customers of ours. I don't know that they all drink 1 to 2 bottles, but they drink on a regular basis.
I
right?
love how you referred to it as a food group.
It is a food group.
We got it all wrong. We've got our proteins, we've got our starches, our wine food group. I like it.
Let me cover the commercial yeast thing for a minute, because this is really important, and then I want to go over to your talk about food group for a moment. But and why wine is so important in our lives, and why wine has been a cultural and religious and art-based drink for centuries, right? And but on the commercial yeast for a moment, here's what's happening with commercial wines. Commercial winemakers use genetically modified commercial yeast that are grown in a laboratory to ferment wine with. And we don't know what this means for our health because nobody studied it. I just know it makes you feel bad, right? And so natural wines are fermented from the wild native yeast that are present on the skin of every grape. Every grape in the world has yeast on the skin, right? It picks it up in the air. And so natural wines are fermented only with these wild indigenous yeasts that are wild and indigenous to the vineyard where the grapes are grown. But the reason commercial winemakers, the very first thing a commercial winemaker does when he makes wine is he used sulfur dioxide to kill the native yeast and then inoculate it with this commercial yeast, which is sturdier and easier and less risky to work with. These wild native yeast in fermentation are very temperamental, right? And they're difficult to work with. They require a lot of coddling because they're just wild and fragile, right? You can't make commercial wine with them because once you start making wine in much quantity, you have to use these tricks of the trade in order to control the process. So that's the reason that commercial wines are always used commercial yeast. And again, we don't know what that means, but there's no studies out there to tell us definitively what these genetically modified commercial yeast are doing to our body. We don't know.
I'm getting very depressed as this goes on because I've got a lot of expensive bottles in the wine cellar that I'm not excited about drinking them now that I'm finding everything that's in these things.
Well, this is a surprising complaint from many of our customers. It's like, I've got this cellar. What am I to do with it? Because once you start drinking these wines, you're going to see they're friendlier with food, they taste better, and you have no negative remnants from them, and it's just a better experience. And people, all this is a very common complaint, like, well, what am I going to do with my cellar now? I can't go back to drinking those wines. Because once you stop drinking these over-extracted, additive-filled wines that are dense and heavy and dark, see, Americans believe that the darker a red wine is, the better the quality it is. Yeah. There's no truth to that at all, but what that results in is winemakers using color agents and extended macerations or contact on skin, which creates this super extracted wine, right? And Robb, who's the most influential wine critic in the last, in history, loves these dark, dense, fruit bomb wines, and he gives them a rating, and then winemakers make these kinds of wines to get his ratings, right? But so anyway, before I depress you any further about wine, let's talk about the happy thing of wine and why wine has been a cultural linchpin to our entire civilization, right? And why people have been drinking wines for nearly 9,000 years, right? What wine should do, and I want to go back to this idea of creative expression and cognitive connection. What wine should do, we don't, like, as an example, I don't drink during the daytime. Nobody at my company drinks during the daytime. It's very common for people naturally in the wine business to drink. We don't think it's healthy. Look, alcohol, let me just make this point. Alcohol is toxic and very dangerous. It's a very dangerous drug, which is one of the reasons that we only drink low alcohol wines, and we only drink them with our meal and at night. But here's what wine does do. When the alcohol is in the correct dose and it's a natural, pure product, wine should gently lift the spirits. It should open the window of vulnerability. which is the reason we bond with people when we enjoy wine with them. It opens that window of vulnerability, increases the expression of authenticity, right? And it opens that window of love. And look, you know, our most basic function is to love and be loved. And wine helps us with loving. And so this is a beautiful thing around the dinner table when we talk and we enjoy wines and we, you know, pontificate over the wine and we enjoy it, and with the food and the pairing, and these wines are elegant and food friendly, and then we're talking and conversations get what we call tapped in, right? So I don't drink, and I don't want your audience drinking to check out.
Right.
I think they should drink to tap in to that connected source energy that we all share. And a little bit of wine just helps elevate that and elevate the expression of love. And this is healthy and also makes us more peak performers.
That's what we're all about here. You know, it's a shame that you're not passionate about this topic, Todd.
What can I tell you, my brother? This is just my thing, right?
Yeah, and I can tell. What about the storage of the wine? Any difference, since you're not throwing in those 76 chemicals and additives? Does it store as well? Does it age like regular? Well, I shouldn't say regular wine. Commercial wine. Is there any sort of storage that's necessary, unique way to make sure that it lasts?
No, not really. I mean, all wines should be stored in a cool, dark place, lying down if you're going to store them for any measurable period of time, so that the cork, you know, comes in contact with the wine. Most of our customers and us, I would venture, I don't age wines. I'm not holding wines. We buy wine to drink. We are wine drinkers. And I would say that's probably true for most of our customers. But here's the more interesting. So they age just the same way a normal wine would age. I mean, a commercial wine would age.
Okay.
But more importantly, I think on the same note, the more interesting thing to know about any wine, but certainly natural wines, is service temperature. So most red wines are served too warm and most white wines too cold, right? And so oftentimes wines are served at room temperature. This is just the number one mistake with a red wine is not to have it properly chilled. So red wine should be served between 55 and 60 degrees. So serious wine drinkers will have a cooler. They're quite inexpensive. You can buy even small countertop ones for, you know, $150, $100, or, you know, more elaborate installed versions. So it's really important, particularly with red wines, to serve them slightly chilled. And how I would achieve that if I didn't have a wine cooler is putting red wine in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes before service. And that will get it to its correct temperature. If you're drinking red wine too warm, it's not expressing itself in the correct way. And so I just encourage people to really think about service temperature. And this is particularly true of lighter, cleaner, more pure natural wines, right? Just a slight chill on them really brings them together in the way that they're meant to be enjoyed. And the same thing with white wine. Don't make it too cold. You know, give it time to sort of bring it out of the refrigerator and give it 15 or 20 minutes before service. Because just the opposite is true. If it's too cold, it's too constricted in flavor expression, and particularly the aromatics. And speaking of the aromatics, you know, for people who are not wine geeks, I mean, aromatics are at least 50% of the wine experience. So when you pour yourself a glass of wine, always be sure that there's plenty of headspace in the glass. Don't fill it too tall. This also helps you drink a little slower and a little less. So in a wine glass that's, you know, a large bowl, I won't have more than, say, an inch and a half wine in it, because I want a lot of headspace in that glass to really express the aromatics.
I love it. And at the end of this show, I'll give you a link, and he's going to actually give us a very interesting promotional. So I appreciate, not only can we talk about it, but we're going to have an opportunity to experience it at the end. So thank you with that. You know, Todd, we've got a few minutes left, and what I wanted to do, because I really love your business model. I wanted to dive in just a little bit on how you created the business, some of the struggles that you've had along the way, not only in the wine business, but you've got a subscription-based business. Some things you may have done differently if you had to do it all over again. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that love this space, the subscription-based model. What's some of your advice in this area?
I've started more than 10 companies. I've had 2 pretty large exits, a handful of moderately successful transitions of one kind or another, one kind of minor failure, and one dramatic failure, which was the business before this one. At the end of that business, I'd been an entrepreneur for a long, long time and had thousands of employees and had a lot of business experience. At the end of that business, I made a list of 15 business rules, right? And this business was born from those rules. And one of those rules is that it would be reoccurring revenue, and subscription is one form of reoccurring revenue. There can be many forms, but it wasn't specific. The rule wasn't specific to subscriptions. It was specific to reoccurring revenue, because most of the businesses I'd been in prior to that, you're only as good as your last sale.
Yeah.
Right. And you were constantly chasing the monkey. Right. And I didn't want to be doing that anymore. Some of the other rules were, as an example, we won't go through all 15, but a couple of the others were, I will never have salespeople again. I'll never have a salesperson that stands between me and my customer. I will have only businesses that sell to thousands of tiny customers. All the prior businesses I had been into always had a handful of large customers that comprised 80% of my revenue. And I wasn't really self-employed. I was working for them.
Right. Yeah.
And they were making the rules, not me. Right? Squeezing me on margins, all these kinds of, or worse than that, and worse than just the margins. It stemmed another rule. I'll never carry accounts receivable again. Right? Those same big customers don't pay on time.
Right.
So I spend all this time loving the customer, creating this experience of beauty for them, and then I have to call them up and break their balls to get them to pay me. Right? So anytime you carry accounts receivable, you're going to be in the collections business. And I decided I don't want to be in the collections business anymore. Yeah. Right? So there were 15 of these rules. Those were just a handful of them. So this business...
And I agree with that philosophy 100%. I had a very similar experience where I had a massive failure. And I went back after that event, and I went back to every single job and business that I ever started. And I wrote down, what did I learn? All the great things that I learned and all the lessons that I learned, because I said I never want to repeat them again. And the only way I'm surely not going to is identify them, because I never want to go back on the lessons. I want to learn it once, and that's it. That's great.
Well, I'm not as smart as you. I've learned some lessons repeatedly.
Oh, no, I am too. I was trying to come up with a new way not to do it again. So far, it's been really interesting. And plus some of the rules, not rules, but some of the lessons that I learned, even when I was a caddy and I was 13 years old, have really served me well. And a lot of those lessons I forgot. So unless I wrote them down and really kept them close, it's a great reminder. So I love how you came up with those 15 rules.
It was, and it guides us today in new investments and business opportunities that we look at even now. It's been a pretty phenomenal, because for 2 reasons. I think our rules and philosophy and our daily practices, everybody here on my team would credit meditation for the reason of our stratospheric rise in financial success, right? So we begin the first hour of our day at our office every day with an hour of meditation together.
The entire team?
Including the warehouse staff and fulfillment team, everyone.
As a group or individual? As
a group. No, we don't meet. This is another thing I learned. I learned from this dramatic, disastrous failure that was my last business. I lost millions. Other people lost millions. It's just a disaster. And from that came my from that was born meditation and as I call my awakening. But we pushing, I think, one of the worst pieces of advice is just how you have to push and just hustle and hustle. And that's not been the key to my success in this business. Growing successful business I've ever started, right? I mean, the business launched in the fourth quarter of 2015, right? 2.5 years ago, 2 years and a few months, fourth quarter of 2015. Our 2015 revenue was $37,000, right? This year we will top 25 million, right? I mean, that's a pretty aggressive growth rate.
Beautiful.
And we did that, I will tell you, and everyone here would tell you, through meditation and kindness. And so we don't, an interesting thing, like I used to, get people to come to work, my other companies like 8:30 in the morning, right? We don't meet until 10 o'clock daily. So we meet at 10, and from 10 to 11, we meet together. We don't open to the public until 11 o'clock. And then we close at 5 p.m. So we're only open 6 hours a day. That's Monday through Friday. We also don't do any after hours emails, no group emails. If we send out a group message, it's over WhatsApp, and it's just generally some kind of a fun thing. We have unlimited PTO. We have no expense policy, right? We have no rules. Our feeling is rules are made for people who, no rules, no forms. The only form we have I can think of are the IRS required tax forms as a new employee and signing up for your insurance. Other than that, we don't have a single form here. Our thoughts are that rules and forms are made for people who can't make good judgments on their own. And I only want to work with people who make good judgments. Yeah. And so every single person I work with, which is only 15 of us running a $30 million business, right? So it's about $2 million per person.
Nice.
So I only want to work with rock stars, right? Every place I've ever been, every employee, every business I've ever had has been a combination of the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. And I didn't want to have that again. So our interview process, as an example, our interview process takes about 6 weeks, and it involves about half a dozen video interviews with various people on various topics, the assignment of project work. In fact, to apply, you have to complete a 15-question questionnaire just to give us your resume. And those 15 questions typically take the average candidate 4 to 6 hours to complete, just for us to even look at your resume. If you're not willing to invest with us and tell us who you are and what your belief system is, and also our job posting is 12 pages long. So our job posting tells you all about our philosophy, all about our daily practices, all about what we call our peace and profit manifesto. This is important. Peace produces profits. So we value peace more than profits. We know that peace will produce profits. What blocks profits are resistance, conflict, right? And so this is what blocks success. It's not working harder. It's being more receptive to receive the abundance that we deserve from our birth, right? And so this is foreign to a lot of people.
I agree 1,000%. When we're brought into an organization, the first thing is they think they're missing something. They think something has to be added. They've got to work harder. And 95% of the time, it's about removing something. It's about removing the blockage, the things that are getting in the way that are preventing, like you said, the profits and the prosperity to flow to them. And very counterintuitive, but it's the truth. It's just, most people have everything that they need. They know what to do. They're just not doing what they know. And there's a reason. and it's not including something, it's about removing something.
Well, I love the proverb, to know and not to do is not to know. Right. So meditation, this is why this is so important, and we believe that this practice is so important, is that meditation and its related practices, that affirmations and visualizations that we go through, the meditations that we practice really remove these barriers of resistance. And they bring everybody to a central place and tapped into a central energy of peace. Right. And this peace allows for massive prosperity because we're not having conflicts. We're not having conflicts with each other. We're not having conflicts with our customer. We have 100% happiness guarantee. If you get anything from us you don't like, or if it's damaged in any way, no need to send us a photograph, return the bottle. We don't care. Just simply call us, email, send a pigeon or a dove. We'll replace it for free, all cost on us. So it's like we don't, we're a wine club. We're a subscription model. If you're on our email list and you go to our website, you sign up, you'll have an opportunity to get special one-time offers. But our business is we're a wine club. But we don't make it difficult to cancel. It's super simple. You can order today and cancel today, right? And get one box. We're not trying to get people, we're not trying to any ballyhoo people into a subscription. Our customers are regular wine drinkers who are peak performers and interested in their health and what they put in their body and their experience in life, as your audience is. They're invested in the experience, right? They care about living. They care about those choices, right? So that's our customer. We don't want to be the wine for everybody. We want to be the wine for people who think like we think, right? And fortunately, there's millions of those people. And so fortunately, we've been able to build, a great business helping people who want to live a better experience. And so so meditation is the foundation of kind of our practice together and how we see the world.
I love that. Is it a guided meditation where as a group, are you going, is one person guiding it? What does that process look like?
Well, so it begins with typically 15 minutes of concentrated quiet meditation, where there's just some meditation rhythm sounds in the background. Meditation music, if you will. It's not really music, but it's kind of these rhythms. And so about 15 minutes in the beginning is just a quiet, what I call concentrated meditation. Then someone will lead into the remaining part of the practice. Oftentimes it's me, but it's sometimes led by two people, just the different arrangements. So everybody gets a chance to lead, so their participation in leading is very important. So anyway, they'll lead through a meditation, maybe some affirmations, some teachings, and then following that, the last half hour is what we call gratitude therapy. And so each person in the circle, and again, this includes kids that work in my warehouse, it's like each person will go around in the circle, and this takes about 30 or 40 minutes, and talks about that day, what they're grateful for in their life. And they usually talk for 1 to 2 minutes, right, about what they're grateful for in that moment. And they're very much, eyes are closed, they're still in a meditative state. It's just very much a flow state. But this open expression of gratitude, grounds everybody and makes people vulnerable. Yeah. This morning we had 3 people cry, right? So it's like this is very open vulnerability. We're very super transparent with each other, and so we talk about difficult topics, but for us, that's the tapped in experience. That's tapping into this experience that we share together, right? And so we had a visitor this morning, a young lad from Austin, Texas, who is a consciousness practitioner who's connected to one of our brothers here. And so he sat in, so there were 16 people in the circle this morning. So this morning, the meditation leader didn't ask specifically to talk about what you're grateful for today. His instruction today was Tell me about an important conversation or conversations that you've had in your life that you're grateful for and what they meant to you.
Nice.
Right. And that's what produced this kind of emotions this morning that people were talking about their grandparents or, but this is very open. And, there's the kid, 21 years old, who runs our warehouse and fulfillment. He's worked for me since he was 19. Yeah, he's worked for me 2 years. He's 21 now. Talked about his grandmother, started crying this morning. He runs our whole warehouse team, so, this is like this cathartic, this kind of vulnerability and openness. I know it's very foreign to what people think of as a business environment, but it's super healthy.
Yeah.
And produces an amazingly peaceful environment.
Yeah.
And one, in our case, of immense prosperity.
In
so
6 hours a day.
In 6 hours. Well, here's the thing, my brother. Let me tell you this. I like to think I'm smarter than most people. Right?
I'm starting to believe that you are. Trust me.
All right. So we all think we're smarter than everybody else. Certainly your audience thinks they're smarter than everybody else they know, or they're smarter than the average person.
Yeah.
So Todd he's like, I think I'm smarter than most people. So I'm like, if I cannot figure out how to generate wealth in 6 hours a day, I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Yeah, I started a company a few years ago, and we gave 2% of the not profits to gross revenue to a charity that we started. We started an in-house charity. And my business partner is like, I don't know how we're going to do that. I said, look, if we can't make money on 98%, close the doors.
Exactly. We're not very smart.
That's
if
right.
I need to work 12 hours a day to get rich, I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Man, I love it. I got to tell you got to write a book for us, because I know we have just gotten the tip of the iceberg here, and you've got some really interesting leadership ideas on how you're running your company. The results are showing up. You're in a great, great niche. Man, you are passionate as hell about your industry and what you're doing. And I tell you, to work for an organization that starts off at 10 o'clock, spends an hour working in meditation and planning for the day and getting your employee. You've got a team, you've got a family there. You don't have workers.
We actually refer to our sales as a family. And if anybody wants to see these job documents just to see how intense they are, you can just go to dryfarmwines.com/jobs, and all of our postings are there, and these all of our practices and how we view the world, and our manifesto is all there. That the documents are there.
That's great. You got to write a book one day about this. This is really good stuff. This is going to be the 530th interview or something like that. And I truly believe that leadership within our organizations today is absolutely pathetic. And it's because leaders aren't stepping up to do what the right thing is. They're just doing the easy thing. And you, sir, are stepping up. You live, you live what you're talking about, and you've stepped up, and you are leading this organization like most are not. So well done.
Well, listen, my brother, here's the thing. We live in a me world, not a we world, right? And when we get management to move from me to we, right, or leadership, greed, right? When we move from the me mentality to the we mentality, and here's the other important point. It's very, very easy to be financially successful when we create value in the world.
Yes.
Right?
It's the only way.
So, there's a lot of people who are creating financial success and struggling with it, who are not creating value, but are pushing that resistance forward uphill. They're still successful. But here's the thing. I take this point of view that money should be the result of something we do. It should be the result of value we create, not the reason we do something. And every business I've been in where money was the reason I was doing it and not the result of the value I was creating, maybe it could have been some of both, but the primary reason was I want to get rich. That's a me mentality, right? As opposed to we want to create value. We want to be the very best in the world at what we do, right? Nobody in the world does what we do. Yeah. We're the very best. We're next of class. We're not best of class. We're next class. we're always looking ahead as innovators. I mean, we have some copycats, of course. You don't have this kind of success without having copycats. And they're not going anywhere because they're copying, not innovating. Yeah. And when you duplicate instead of innovate, you're just not going to be much, because you're always going to be following the leader. You can't duplicate and be in first place. First place is always reserved for innovators. So anyway, that's what else you want to talk about today?
Brother, man, we could talk here for about another 3 hours, because I know we just got the tip, but we're 50 minutes in this, and I want the opportunity to share with our audience that wonderful offer that you made to us and how we can actually get some of these delicious wines.
Awesome. So for your listeners, we're offering a penny bottle. We can't legally give alcohol away, so we sell it for a penny. We're offering a penny bottle with their first order. And all they have to do is go to a simple link, and they'll see your mugshot on the link. It's called dryfarmwines.com/Thor Conklin. That's just dryfarmwines.com/Thor Conklin. And they'll see the penny offer there, and they'll get introduced to a healthy, pure, natural way to drink.
Brother, I am your first customer. You told me I've got to wait about 6 hours before I can actually use that link. I am going to be the first one there. I really appreciate your time today. I was not expecting, quite frankly, these value bombs that you dropped. Brother, you are doing an amazing job, the very best. I know that the $30 million mark is just the beginning of this thing. You've got an amazing product here and an amazing company, and I can't wait to see where you go with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really appreciate being on today. I want to, we use terms like soul and brother and bringing people together and community and love a lot here. And it reminds me, I just want to, when we think about business, when I think about, of course, we have management situations. Of course, we have situations where we need to intervene with one of our partners, a family member who is having some kind of external influence that's distracting to their work. This happens in every organization. But we take a different approach. We take an approach with love and unconditional commitment. And so I just encourage people in their organizations to think about that, our most fundamental need is to love and to be loved. And it reminds me of a quote by Ram Dass that goes as follows. It's very simple, and I want to close with this. We're all just walking each other home. And, together, that's just all that's happening here. And it happens for a really, really quick period. We're all just walking each other home. And if we can live with peace and love together, I promise you make a lot more money.
Todd, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you.